A man does not fall in a single moment. It is the small, silent compromises, the overlooked sins, the rationalized indulgences that chip away at his strength. What was once a conviction becomes a suggestion and eventually an afterthought. The soul does not lose its fire in an instant. It dims with each surrender to ease, to pleasure, to apathy. But here lies the great deception. Weakness is not the moment of collapse, but the long trail of choices that led there. The strong man is the one who refuses to barter his integrity for momentary ease. Strength is built in discomfort. No warrior trains in leisure. No wise man is shaped by an unchallenged mind. Yet many seek a faith that demands nothing of them, a faith that fits neatly into their schedules, that never asks them to wrestle with hard truth. But a man who prefers comfort over growth will never be strong. He will remain stagnant, unshaken, not because he is firm, but because he has refused to step forward. Strength is not found in what is easy, but in what is true. No man is meant to walk alone. Even the strongest will falter when surrounded by no one but themselves. Without wise counsel, without a brother to sharpen him, a man grows dull. He begins to justify his weaknesses, to believe his struggles are his alone, and soon his strength is but a memory. The remedy? Fellowship. Iron sharpens iron, not by idle agreement, but by challenge, by accountability, by the shared pursuit of righteousness. To stand strong, a man must surround himself with those who will not let him fall in silence. Perhaps the greatest weakness of all is self-reliance. The man who believes he can stand alone is the one who falls the hardest. He reads wisdom but does not apply it, prays but does not listen, works but does not surrender. Strength does not come from the will alone. It comes from dependence on truth, on wisdom. A man does not grow strong by his own striving, but by yielding to the one who strengthens. To abandon these habits is to reclaim what was lost. Let a man guard against small compromises, embrace discomfort for the sake of truth, seek out wise companionship, and relinquish his reliance on self. Strength is not found in the absence of struggle, but in the presence of unwavering conviction. A man does not wake up one morning and find himself weak. His strength does not vanish in a moment of failure. Instead, it fades quietly, almost imperceptibly, through small and seemingly harmless compromises. The erosion of strength is never dramatic. It is subtle, slow, and deceptive. At first, the choices seem insignificant. A man who once stood firm on truth begins to make exceptions. He convinces himself that a small deviation from his principles will do no harm. Perhaps he tells a harmless lie to avoid an uncomfortable situation. Perhaps he justifies an action he once condemned because everyone else is doing it. He does not yet see the danger. He believes he remains strong even as his foundation begins to crack. Compromise always begins in the mind. It is the whispered excuse, the rationalization that makes wrongdoing appear justified. It's just this once, he tells himself. It's not a big deal. But what starts as a single concession becomes a pattern. The mind, having accepted a small deviation, finds it easier to accept a greater one. A man who once shunned dishonesty now tells himself that a slight distortion of truth is necessary. A man who once guarded his heart now welcomes distractions that dull his convictions. The most dangerous thing about silent compromise is that it never appears dangerous in the moment. It disguises itself as practicality, as flexibility, as the wisdom of the world. A man who refuses to take part in corruption is called rigid. A man who holds fast to integrity in the face of pressure is called unreasonable. And so, to avoid discomfort, to fit in, he yields. He bends where he once stood firm. Over time, these small compromises shape the man himself. He no longer recognizes the lines he once refused to cross. His standards have shifted. His convictions have softened. What he once considered unacceptable now seems normal, even necessary. He does not realize how much he has changed, because each step has been too small to alarm him. He still believes himself to be strong, but strength is not measured by how loudly a man proclaims his values. It is revealed in whether he still holds them when it costs him something. The enemy of strength is not always an open attack. More often, it is the slow dulling of resolve. A soldier who sees his enemy approaching will prepare for battle, but a man who does not recognize the threat will lower his guard, unaware that he is being overtaken. This is how compromise weakens a man, not by force, but by persuasion, by ease, by the slow and steady erosion of his will. A man who gives in to small compromises will one day find himself surrendering to things he once thought impossible. He will wonder how he reached this place, how his convictions became so weak. He will look back and realize that the moment of collapse was not the true moment of failure. The failure happened long before, in the first step away from what he knew to be right. To avoid this slow descent, a man must be vigilant. He must recognize that small compromises are never small in their consequences. They are the seeds of greater failures, planted in moments of carelessness. Strength is not built in dramatic gestures of heroism. It is built in the quiet daily choices to stand firm, even when no one is watching. A man must decide, again and again, whether he will hold to his principles or let them slip for the sake of convenience. He must ask himself whether he is willing to sacrifice what is right for what is easy. The test of a man's strength is not in how he stands when the battle is great, but in how he stands when the choice seems small. A man who refuses to compromise in the little things will be unshakable when the great trials come. A man who loves comfort more than growth will never be strong. He will never build the resilience needed to stand firm in adversity because he has trained himself to avoid difficulty at all costs. Growth demands struggle, but comfort offers ease. A man cannot embrace both and expect to remain unshaken. Comfort persuades a man to settle for less than he is capable of. It whispers that there is no need to push beyond what is familiar, no need to strive for something greater. It tells him that the effort required to grow is unnecessary, that he is fine as he is. And so he remains stagnant, choosing what is easy over what is right. He avoids the discomfort of self-discipline, the inconvenience of challenge, and the burden of responsibility. A man who prioritizes comfort will always seek the path of least resistance. He will choose what is convenient over what is necessary. He will avoid the difficult conversations that could strengthen his relationships. He will refuse to confront his weaknesses because doing so would require effort. He will justify laziness as rest, indulgence as self-care, and inaction as patience. He does not see that each time he chooses comfort over growth, he becomes weaker. The pursuit of comfort weakens a man's mind. He begins to shy away from hard truths because they make him uncomfortable. He rejects wisdom that challenges him because it requires change. He seeks affirmation rather than correction, surrounding himself with voices that soothe his ego instead of sharpening his character. He prefers flattery to rebuke, encouragement to discipline, and affirmation to truth. His ability to think deeply, to wrestle with hard questions, begins to fade because he no longer allows himself to be challenged. A man who fears discomfort will never develop true strength. He will avoid taking risks because failure is painful. He will refuse to stand up for what is right because doing so invites opposition. He will settle for mediocrity because excellence demands sacrifice. He will excuse his weaknesses instead of overcoming them. And in the end, he will find that his love for comfort has robbed him of the very thing he hoped to preserve: his strength. Physical strength is built through resistance. A man who lifts heavy weights increases his endurance by pushing against opposition. If he avoids discomfort, if he refuses to challenge himself, his muscles will weaken. The same is true for his mind and spirit. Strength is forged in struggle. Without it, a man grows soft. The love of comfort leads to avoidance. A man who values ease will avoid responsibility because it is difficult. He will avoid confrontation because it is unpleasant. He will avoid growth because it requires effort. He will tell himself that he is choosing peace when, in reality, he is choosing passivity. He will call it patience when it is really fear. He will claim contentment when it is actually complacency. Comfort makes a man hesitant. He delays action, waiting for the perfect conditions that never come. He tells himself he will change when it is easier, when he has more time, when the circumstances are just right. But the moment never arrives, and so he remains the same. He does not realize that every time he chooses comfort over action, he strengthens his habit of avoidance. A man who values comfort above all else will eventually become dependent on it. He will seek pleasure as a means of escape. He will numb himself with entertainment, with distractions, with anything that allows him to avoid the discomfort of reality. He will become restless, always searching for something to fill the void, yet unwilling to do the hard work of true fulfillment. He will mistake momentary pleasure for lasting satisfaction, indulgence for joy, and ease for peace. Growth requires pain. It requires sacrifice. It demands that a man be willing to face his weaknesses, to endure hardship, to push beyond what is comfortable. A man who wishes to be strong must choose discomfort over ease, discipline over indulgence, and truth over convenience. He must be willing to endure the fire, knowing that only through struggle will he be made strong. A man who walks alone may believe himself to be strong, but isolation is the first sign of weakness. He convinces himself that solitude is strength, that he needs no one, that he can bear his burdens alone. But the weight of life is not meant to be carried in solitude. A man without brothers is a man without protection. Isolation weakens a man's judgment. Without wise counsel, he begins to trust only in his own understanding. He loses the sharpening influence of others, the voices that challenge him, the wisdom that warns him when he is drifting. Alone, his blind spots remain unseen. Alone, his weaknesses grow unchecked. He begins to believe that his thoughts are always right, that his way is the only way. But a man who relies only on himself is easily deceived. A man without brotherhood has no accountability. He has no one to call him back when he strays, no one to remind him of his principles when the world pressures him to compromise. He becomes the sole judge of his actions, and in the absence of accountability, self-justification takes root. He convinces himself that his failures are not failures, that his compromises are necessary, that his isolation is proof of his independence. But in reality, he is becoming weaker with every step away from community. When trials come, the isolated man has no one to strengthen him. He faces hardships alone with no one to lift him when he stumbles. He has no one to offer encouragement when his spirit is weary, no one to remind him of truth when doubt clouds his mind. He believes he must endure alone, and so he does until the weight becomes unbearable. The strong man is not the one who walks alone, but the one who has brothers to carry him when he cannot carry himself. Pride keeps a man from seeking brotherhood. He believes he does not need others, that he is self-sufficient. He sees asking for help as weakness. He views correction as an attack rather than a gift. He tells himself that he is better off alone, that no one understands him, that no one can be trusted. And so he withdraws, believing he is guarding his strength, when in reality he is dismantling it. The man who isolates himself is an easy target. A lone soldier on the battlefield is vulnerable. He has no one to watch his back, no one to defend him when he is surrounded. The enemy does not need to overpower him. He only needs to keep him alone long enough for exhaustion to set in. In isolation, a man is at his weakest, not because he lacks the ability to stand, but because he has no one to stand with him. Brotherhood is not simply friendship. It is a bond forged through shared purpose, through mutual sharpening, through commitment to truth. A man does not need many companions, but he needs a few who will not let him fall. He needs men who will challenge him when he is wrong, who will strengthen him when he is weak, who will remind him of who he is when he forgets. Without this, even the strongest man will eventually falter. Isolation leads to stagnation. A man who has no one to challenge him stops growing. He becomes comfortable in his ways, unchallenged in his thoughts, unshaken in his habits. He begins to drift, not because he intends to, but because there is no one to call him back. He loses the sharpening that only comes from the presence of others who are also striving for truth. Without brotherhood, he does not become better. He simply remains the same. A man must choose brotherhood just as he must choose strength. He must seek out those who will walk beside him, who will correct him in love, who will refuse to let him settle for less than he is called to be. He must welcome accountability, embrace correction, and reject the lie that strength is found in isolation. Strength is not measured by how well a man stands alone, but by how well he stands with others. A man who relies on himself alone believes that strength comes from within. He sees his abilities, his intellect, and his willpower as the source of his success. He convinces himself that if he simply tries harder, thinks smarter, and works longer, he can overcome any challenge. He does not realize that self-reliance is the very thing making him weak. Self-reliance blinds a man to his own limitations. He believes he can carry burdens too heavy for him, that he can control circumstances beyond his reach. He refuses to ask for help, seeing it as a sign of weakness. He tells himself that he must solve every problem alone, that admitting his need for guidance is failure. But no man, no matter how strong, can bear the weight of life on his own. A man who trusts in himself will eventually come to the end of his strength. He will push forward, striving with all his might until exhaustion overtakes him. He will face battles he cannot win alone, trials that expose the limits of his endurance. And in that moment, he will be forced to admit what he has long denied: his strength is not enough. No man was meant to stand alone. The reliance on self leads to pride. A man begins to believe that his success is his own doing, that his wisdom is sufficient, that his plans are flawless. He no longer seeks wisdom from outside himself. He dismisses correction because he trusts his own judgment above all else. He refuses counsel because he believes he knows best. And yet, pride always precedes a fall, for a man who refuses guidance will eventually walk into destruction. A self-reliant man struggles in silence. He does not share his burdens, does not seek wisdom, does not lean on anything greater than himself. He wrestles with fears and doubts alone, unwilling to admit his weaknesses. He convinces himself that he must be strong, even when he is breaking inside. But strength is not found in pretending to have no weakness. True strength is found in acknowledging that no man is sufficient in himself. When a man relies on himself, he builds his life on an unstable foundation. He places his confidence in things that can fail: his own abilities, his plans, his control over circumstances. But what happens when his strength is not enough? When his plans collapse? When life does not bend to his will? The self-reliant man has no answer. He has nothing to fall back on but himself, and when he reaches his breaking point, he has nowhere to turn. Self-reliance makes a man impatient. He refuses to wait for wisdom, for guidance, for the right timing. He acts on impulse, convinced that quick action is always better than stillness. He does not pause to reflect, to seek counsel, to ask for help. He sees waiting as weakness, dependence as failure. But in his rush to act, he often chooses poorly, making decisions that lead him further into struggle rather than out of it. A man who relies only on himself will carry unnecessary burdens. He will try to fix what is beyond his control, to force solutions that are not his to create. He will exhaust himself striving for things that cannot be achieved through effort alone. He does not realize that surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. Strength is not found in bearing every weight, but in knowing which ones to lay down. When a man finally realizes his need for something greater than himself, he begins to understand true strength. He learns that wisdom is found in seeking guidance, that strength is built in dependence on truth, that endurance is not about pushing harder, but about standing on a foundation that does not fail. He comes to see that self-reliance is not the path to strength, it is the very thing that keeps a man weak. A man who neglects discipline does not lose his strength all at once. His decline is gradual, almost imperceptible. At first, he allows himself small indulgences. He sleeps a little longer, pushes responsibilities aside for another day, gives in to distractions. He tells himself these are harmless, that he deserves a break, that he will regain control tomorrow. But discipline, once abandoned, does not return easily. Discipline is the foundation of strength. A man who is disciplined governs himself well. He masters his emotions, his desires, his time. He does not wait for motivation to drive him forward. He acts because he knows what must be done. Without discipline, a man drifts. He no longer controls his actions, his impulses do. He becomes ruled by convenience, choosing what is easy over what is right. A man who lacks discipline loses control over his thoughts. His mind becomes restless, jumping from one distraction to another. He finds it difficult to focus, to think deeply, to reflect on truth. He replaces effort with entertainment, wisdom with noise. He convinces himself that he is too busy for discipline, too tired, too overwhelmed. But in reality, it is his neglect of discipline that has made him weak. Discipline shapes a man's character. It teaches him patience, endurance, resilience. A man who is disciplined does not give up easily. He faces hardship without shrinking back. He works when others quit, perseveres when others surrender. Without discipline, a man is easily broken. The first sign of difficulty makes him retreat. The first challenge discourages him. He lacks the endurance to push through because he has never trained himself to persist. Neglecting discipline weakens a man's will. He becomes easily swayed by his emotions. He gives in to temptation because he has never taught himself to resist. He chooses comfort over responsibility, indulgence over self-control. He does not see the danger in small compromises, not realizing that every choice he makes is shaping the man he becomes. A man who cannot rule himself will always be ruled by something else. A man without discipline struggles with inconsistency. He begins things, but does not finish them. He sets goals, but does not achieve them. He makes promises, but does not keep them. His words lose weight because his actions do not align with them. He wonders why he lacks confidence, why he feels directionless, why he cannot seem to build momentum. The answer is always the same: he has not built the habits necessary for strength. Discipline is not merely about routine, it is about mastery. A man who disciplines himself is not controlled by his impulses. He chooses his actions rather than reacting to circumstances. He decides what is best rather than following what is easiest. His strength is not dependent on how he feels, but on what he has trained himself to do. Without discipline, a man is like a ship without a rudder, drifting unanchored at the mercy of the winds. The neglect of discipline leads to regret. A man who avoids discipline now will face the consequences later. He will look back and see wasted time, lost opportunities, unrealized potential. He will see the moments when he could have pushed forward, but instead chose to retreat. He will wonder how he became weak, how he lost his edge, how he let himself drift so far from the man he intended to be. A man who values strength must value discipline. He must train himself daily, choosing what is right over what is easy. He must reject the lie that discipline is restrictive and embrace the truth that it is the very thing that makes him free. A man who neglects discipline does not remain the same. He grows weaker, more passive, more controlled by forces outside himself. But a man who embraces discipline builds strength that cannot be shaken. A man who fears failure will never reach his full potential. He will hesitate, second guess, and hold back when he should step forward. He will convince himself that the risk is too great, that the possibility of defeat is too painful to endure. Instead of moving with confidence, he will wait, hoping for the perfect conditions that never come. His fear will paralyze him, keeping him from the growth and strength that only come through struggle. Failure is not the true enemy. It is the fear of it that weakens a man. A man who sees failure as something to be avoided at all costs will live cautiously, never stretching himself beyond what feels safe. He will refuse to try new things, fearing that he will embarrass himself. He will reject challenges that test his limits, afraid of what others will think if he falls short. His fear will not only keep him from great achievements, but also rob him of the lessons that come through struggle. A man ruled by the fear of failure becomes passive. He waits for certainty, for guarantees of success, for reassurance that everything will go according to plan. But certainty never comes, and guarantees are illusions. The man who refuses to move until he is sure of victory will never move at all. He will remain where he is, watching others grow while he stays stagnant. His potential will remain unrealized, not because he was incapable, but because he refused to take the first step. Fear of failure weakens a man's resolve. He begins projects, but abandons them the moment difficulty arises. He dreams of greatness, but shrinks back when effort is required. He longs for achievement, but avoids the struggle necessary to attain it. Instead of facing his fears, he finds excuses. He was too busy. The timing wasn't right. The circumstances were against him. But beneath all these justifications is the same truth: he was afraid. A man who fears failure is constantly at war with his own mind. He imagines worst-case scenarios, playing them over and over in his thoughts. He convinces himself that failure will be disastrous, that it will define him, that he will never recover. But failure is rarely as catastrophic as fear makes it seem. More often, failure is a teacher, a painful but necessary guide that shows a man where he must grow. Those who fear failure miss these lessons, remaining trapped in their own self-imposed limitations. Avoiding failure often leads to even greater regret. A man may believe he is protecting himself by playing it safe, but in time he will look back and see all the chances he never took. He will remember the dreams he abandoned out of fear. He will see the opportunities he let pass by. And worse than the pain of failure will be the pain of wondering what could have been. A man can recover from failure, but regret is far harder to overcome. A man who fears failure also fears judgment. He worries about what others will say if he stumbles. He becomes overly concerned with appearances, striving to maintain a perfect image rather than taking the risks necessary for growth. He begins to measure his worth by how well he performs rather than by his willingness to try. He would rather stay within his comfort zone, where he cannot fail, than step into the unknown, where he might also succeed. Strength is not found in avoiding failure, but in learning from it. A man who understands this embraces challenges. He knows that failure is not a reflection of his worth, but a tool for refining his character. He does not fear setbacks because he understands that growth comes through trial and error. He does not let past failures define him, but rather uses them as stepping stones toward greater wisdom and resilience. The fear of failure is a prison that keeps a man from living fully. It keeps him from pursuing his calling, from taking bold action, from standing firm in the face of uncertainty. The man who overcomes this fear does not seek perfection, but progress. He does not measure himself by whether he avoids failure, but by whether he continues to move forward in spite of it. A man who is willing to fail is a man who is truly free.